South Africa's social landscape is evolving, and a new report from Statistics SA is providing a data-driven to look at those changes from the continued dominance of isiZulu to the increasing number of multiracial households. The Cultural Dynamics report reveals fascinating shifts over the past 26 years. Let's now delve into the details and hear from the Acting Director General of Stats SA, Molayi. Soli, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. So first of all, what does this data tell us before we get into the numbers?
Morning and morning to the viewers. I think, Aldrin, what we wanted to provide to the South African and also to our policymakers is to give them some insight in terms of the indicators that deals with cultural diversity in South Africa. In this report, we're looking at issues around language, as you already mentioned. We're looking at issues around religions. We're also looking at issues around marriages. And we felt that since we have come up from the census being one of a big survey that we're conducting as a national statistical agency, we wanted to provide some quantitative indicators around these key statistical fields.
Yeah, okay. I want to now go to the provinces with the highest number of multiracial households. And looking at the stats coming out there, Western Cape at 17%, and then you have Gauteng at 14.1%. What does this tell us? Oh, sorry, 14.6% rather. What does this tell us in terms of the multiracial households? Whereas on the other end, if you look, for instance, at multilingualism, it is actually Gauteng that is leading.
Okay, so if you look at the languages, let's start with the languages. You have already mentioned that isiZulu is the most spoken languages. So the way we're asking questions in census, we're asking what is the spoken language in the household, and isiZulu is being the dominant or the most spoken language in the household. When you overlay these in terms of provinces, we see that Gauteng it doesn't have the single dominant language, and this alternately has to. If you have to also look at it in terms of the migration patterns that we're having. So if you look at our migration flows for Gauteng, whether it's domestic or international, Gauteng is the one that is being a destination for most of our migrants. And that's one. Secondly, Gauteng is one of the provinces that it's got a lot of people in it, and it is also an economic hub. So that is why you're seeing Gauteng it doesn't have a dominant language. Going to the multilingual household, we're seeing that they are leading in Western Cape. Again, it has to do with the migration patterns that we know that from Western Cape, with Eastern Cape being influenced, migrants are going to Western Cape. Again, that also influenced the numbers.
Yeah. Then juxtapose that then to the provinces with the lowest number of multiracial households. Limpopo at 6.7%, and then the Northwest at 7.3%. And economically speaking, these would be provinces that are considered to be rural provinces.
Yes, and I think the other thing, Aldrin, is that if you look at the overall, the multiracial households in South Africa, actually they have increased from 0.3% in 2001 and now around 11.4%. I think that on its own, it gives us a sense that we are starting to see what we call it the interracial relationships that are happening. Because the way we are measuring it, we're looking at the population groups within the household. And that is the reason why we see. So to your point, if you look at your Limpopo, your Northern Northwest, those provinces, they have less or fewer households that are, we call them multiracial households. And again, if you look at the economic hub, to your point, these are not economic hub. If you look at the unemployment rate, we think, especially for Northwest, we are also seeing that there is an increase there in terms of unemployment rate. So you are quite right.
Okay, let's then quickly go back to the numbers. The most spoken official language, as we've indicated a bit earlier on, is isiZulu, then followed by Xhosa. Then we also have Afrikaans. What is it though about the dominance of isiZulu that even over the years, because since the stats have been taken, isiZulu has always dominated. What is it about isiZulu that has made it secure that #1 spot throughout the years of the census data being collected?
Yes, And I think for me, this will be an interesting research question for some of our master students and PhD students, because one will have to find out whether what could be the reasons, because with the census, we don't ask the reasons why are they speaking that languages. But we have seen that actually isiZulu is being dominating. And again, if you group the languages like the Nguni languages, you'll see that they're actually dominating in terms of the language. Look at the population. If you look at the population, again, Gauteng leading, KZN is coming in as part of the leading provinces in terms of the number in terms of population size. So I think, Aldrin, it would be very interesting to know from the researchers to deep dive into these numbers and give us the qualitative nature of these numbers.
Yeah, still sticking on languages, now looking at unofficial languages or foreign languages. The number one foreign language or unofficial language being spoken in South Africa is Shona. And then it's followed by Chichewa or Chewa or Chinyanja or Nyanja, which we understand is also one of the languages being spoken in Zimbabwe. Shona, of course, being spoken in Zimbabwe as well. Then number 3, you have Portuguese, and then you have the others that will follow after that. With the Portuguese one specifically, could that be because of the number of migrants that the country has that are coming from Mozambique?
Correct. So if you look at our statistics in terms of migration, you see that the SADC region, that's where we are getting a lot of migration flows from. So you've mentioned countries like Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, and Malawi, because this is where we are getting a lot of migrants. Then that is why you are seeing Shona. We're talking about 721,000 people who are speaking these languages. And again, it also gave us an interesting insight in terms of the non-official languages, that there is people in South Africa that are speaking this language, and collectively they were talking about 1.2 million non-official language speakers in the country.
Okay, and then let's go on to the marriages one, which is actually part of the poll that we are running this morning. Let's just quickly see if we can bring up that poll. The question that we're asking our viewers this morning is what they believe could be informing these statistics that we're seeing when it comes to marriages. Let's just see if we can bring up that poll quickly. The poll speaks to marriages as well as marriages being divided into race, but specifically when it comes to black people. According to Stats SA, less black Africans are getting married. What could be the reason behind this? Could it be financial hardships? Could it be times have changed? Could it be relationships are hard? 54% of the people saying that relationships are hard. Financial hardships at 36% and 10% saying that the times have changed. If you want to participate in the polls, just scan that QR code. It will then take you to the landing page. And Soli, I know that you say that Stats SA doesn't necessarily ask what could be the reason behind the numbers that we are seeing. But from a personal view, and maybe from some of the data that you have collected, what could be the reason why we're seeing about 54.8% of white people married, and then you compare that to your black African counterparts at 19.2%. And I was saying to the team a bit earlier on as well, that for me, it almost seems that there's a correlation also between marriages and economic activity or even employment.
Thank you so much, Aldrin. I think I should also participate in your poll, and so that I can also give my. But I think when we put together the chapter in this report where we wanted to understand the cultural dynamics of marriages in South Africa, we were fully aware that this is quite a complex, and it has a lot of, it's blended by diversity of ethnic tradition and religious practice. And we are very well aware that there's a modern influences into it. And to your point, there's also some social economic factors. And what we are trying to put in here, and also trying to give the policymakers, and especially also the researchers who are in this space, is that we are seeing that over time, when you look at never married persons in South Africa, Africans, they recorded the highest, and the white population group recorded the lowest, as you have mentioned. And again, overlaying this with some other indicators that we are collecting, for example, you spoke about the economic indicators. Again, the white population, they are in terms of the percentage and even numbers, you will find that they're in terms of the employment rate is quite, employment rate is high compared to your Black African where unemployment rate is high. Again, with the information that we also released around the income of households, similarly, again, we're seeing the same picture. But what we are also picking up, Aldrin, is that if you look at these numbers over time and then you look at the issue around staying together, which means that living together as husband and wife, I think loosely we call it fat and set. We are seeing that over time, these have actually increased in the population. We are seeing that it moves from in 1996, where it was sitting around 4.5%, and now it's moving to around 8%. So again, when you're profiling those who are living together as husband and wife or partners, the Black population, they are in majority in that group. Maybe your survey that you are running this morning in terms of economic reason could be the reason. One could also conclude that probably yes, it's true, because we are aware that as a Black Africans, for us to deem a marriage, there is a process that we follow in terms of lobola and also introducing families, which also come with a cost on its own. Whereas for white population and other population groups in South Africa, they don't necessarily follow that path.
Yeah, and with that said, especially when it comes to with the lobola, so we know of the ceremonies that will be taking place, and then as the courts have said that once that ceremony has taken place, it is recognized as a marriage. But where would Stats SA get its data from if you don't have data around traditional marriages that would have taken place, but not necessarily registered with Home Affairs?
Yes, I think this is the tricky one, Aldrin, because the census is just asking them, it's about the marital status in the household. In 2 weeks' time, I will be releasing a report that talks to the numbers that are coming from Home Affairs. Again, that data is just telling us the number of marriages that is being registered in that particular year. In this case, it will be for 2024. If I went through a ceremony, as you are mentioning it, but I didn't register it with Home Affairs, unfortunately, that marriage, it won't be registered in that database. So when we are releasing, that's where the gap comes in. And hence, there is always the data that we are releasing, as I said, next week. There is a late registration that one can actually look at it and see what could be the reason why there was a late registration of marriages. So it will give us some little bit of a proxy insight in terms of the tradition or traditional weddings that were never registered, but later they were registered because of either a partner passed away and now the other partner want to claim for estate, and then they needed to register the marriage.
Yeah, interesting dynamics. Thank you so much. Solly Molayi, Stats SA Acting DDG there, on the cultural dynamics report that has been released by Stats SA, of course being informed by the data from census as well.